Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Two Chaps, Many Cultures, episode 146. And today we'll talk yet again, as we have done so before on this program, about diversity. Not necessarily diversity in the workplace, where you, as an adult, get introduced to a topic that may or may not be new to you. Maybe we should be starting talking about diversity and inclusiveness at a much earlier stage in our lives. And we have somebody who knows a thing or two about this. Stay tuned. Welcome, sir. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Absolutely. Weekend of digging out of piles and piles of snow. But that's typical of Chicago.
So those of you who live in sunnier climates, snow, that's a form of frozen water that descends from the heavens and accumulates on top of humanity. And people in the Midwest really, really like it a lot. That's why they get a lot of it. Right, Brett?
Absolutely. It's like my natural habitat as an Australian. Where else could I possibly feel any more at home?
There we go. And feeling at home, even though you may not necessarily be familiar with your surroundings at first, but how do you feel at home if your home isn't like everybody else's home, or if the people that live in your home don't look like the people outside of your home? How do you feel like you belong? We talked about this last week on Friday with Alan, and the belonging part, the feeling that I am a part of my environment, regardless of the way I look or who I pray to or what I eat and the language I speak. That part of belonging begins, that search for or meaning making of identity begins at a very early age. So why, one might ask, are we only talking about this at an adult stage of our lives, maybe in the workplace when there is a diversity hiccup or something? Wouldn't it be smart, one might ask, to address these questions a little early in life? Brett, how would you feel about that?
I would feel very good about that if we could do that. That would take out a lot of, you would think it would take out a lot of work, probably put a lot of people out of work, actually. Even this is one of those cases where it'd be good if we could put diversity and inclusion practice out of work when it finally got to the workplace. But it's sorely needed. But, if we can actually embed this early on, absolutely. This would save a lot of friction, I think. Yeah.
Wouldn't it be smart to include people that know a thing or two about early childhood development?
Well, you know us. We need to learn.
Right. Well, let's cut to the chase. We have somebody who does exactly that. And we want to welcome all the way from Bengaluru, India, our dear friend Akhila Das Bla. And I'm hoping I pronounced your name properly. So Akhila, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Christian. I'm so glad to be here.
And how do you say your name?
Akhila Das Bla. Yeah.
Akhila. So it's a hard k sound that resonates in the throat. Akhila.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. And you are based in Bengaluru, which means it's already late in the day for you. So good evening to you. Well, it is a good morning to us. And is that where you're originally from?
Yes, actually, that is where I'm originally from. But my father was in the defense, and so we kind of traveled all over India. So it's hard to call any one place home. But yeah, Bangalore's where the roots are.
So you and a business partner have developed a product or a suite of products, or a growing suite of products, that allow us to address the diversity topic at a childhood age. So let's start at the beginning. What is it you do, and how is it different from exposing children to diversity that you've seen before you came up with your idea?
So basically what we do is, I am basically a co-founder at Indigrow, and we create multicultural books and games and songs to children all over the world. We've started with India because it's the largest diaspora. We've moved on to Singapore, and we have plans for other cultures in play as well. The idea being that we want to kind of introduce conversations of diversity and inclusion at an early stage, because conversations help children make sense of the world around them. Children as early as 2 years of age can kind of notice differences in culture. They notice differences in race, and it's something that they're used to kind of notice and observe. And a lot of the times what happens with parents is that we kind of shush these conversations, because children are curious by nature. Like, why is this different? Why is this happening like this? Why is that person talking so weirdly? Why is that person looking different? And we're like, no, that's not polite. Shh, don't say that. Don't talk like that. And we kind of shush children. And what we're trying to say is that children are naturally curious. And when they're naturally curious and you provide opportunity for them to explore that curiosity, to kind of make connections based on the similarities that they see in other people, and also teach them about accepting the differences that they see in other people through the language that they know best, which is play, automatically what you're doing is you're raising kind and empathetic children. And what the world needs today is kind and empathetic people. And
I couldn't agree more.
Our philosophy is what we're trying to do.
So let me rewind your story then a little bit more. What prompted you specifically to get involved in that topic? Did you ever experience this being hushed up, or did somebody else hush up your children? I don't know. What prompted this?
So it's quite interesting, actually, because so my co-founder and I, so Shama, we're friends. We've been friends for 20 years. We were in college together. We've kind of almost grown up together in that sense. And I've had a background in early childhood education and worked with children all my life. And around the time that she was pregnant, which is about 3-4 years ago now, she of course, had traveled the world, and she ended up being in Singapore, married to a South African, raising this half Indian, half South African child in Singapore. And at the time that she was, she was pregnant, she was thinking about, how do I introduce my culture, my roots to this child who is obviously growing up in a multicultural environment. He's, growing up in a multicultural household. And while, she wanted to introduce India to him, but she also wanted to introduce it in a way that was contemporary, that was global, because she was raising a global child. And this is something that I had dealt with as well when I was teaching, and I was working with children, and we're looking at all the educative material that was out there, even for Indian children in India, right? You'd find a lot of the context was not cultural. It was always out of context. So Indian children in India themselves were growing up with context that was, educational books that, would have a blonde and a blue-eyed child, talking about something. And we were like, there has to be a way in which we can introduce culture to children that allows them to be able to look at themselves in the mirror and say, hey, that's me, and recognize that. At the same time, create content out there for children to look at other children growing up across the world and say, okay, that's what it's like. And, my skin might be a different color, and we may eat different food, and we may speak different languages, but we both like to play ball. And to kind of find those similarities and connect that. And so she asked me to come on board, and I jumped at the idea, and that's where we started. And we started with Indigrow with the Indian collection, and then we've moved on to Singapore now. We've just released our Singapore collection. Singapore, as you know, is a melting pot of different cultures across the world. And now we're just spreading culture by culture. And that's the idea for us going forward.
Nice.
Do we have the my daughter goes to a school here which is really, really diverse here in Chicago. It's actually, I don't know much about the outside of the school system here, but we just landed very luckily in an area that has a great deal of diversity, both Korean and African American, Mexican, predominantly, things like that. So there are multiple languages spoken at the school, and so do you, and also styles of learning. So as an early childhood professional, do you feel that it's important for teachers also to understand, as well as parents, the different styles their students might be learning as from their cultural background, and so by osmosis, they're playing differently? Are they playing differently even from those perspectives?
Absolutely. I think that your culture plays such a big role in terms of how you think, how you kind of absorb the environment, right? And I think that what happens with children is that what you kind of notice around you, obviously you have what we call your obvious interactions and what comes to the forefront, what people are clearly telling you, but what you also absorb is the unconscious bias, right? You absorb the unconscious messaging or the subconscious messaging that is all around you all the time. And it's simple things, right? Like at an early childhood level. Now, say, for example, I'm a child who eats yellow rice and I take it to school, but in an environment where children have never come across yellow rice before, somebody's going to point that out and say, "You, why is your rice yellow?" Automatically, at a 2.5, 3-year age, I'm suddenly looking at my rice and saying, okay, there's something wrong here. There's something wrong about what my food is. And this is something that actually brings me great joy and comfort. It's something that makes me happy. But I very quickly learn that it's something that I need to leave at home. It is not something that we share with the world. And that's where, you know, and that's something really powerful for a 3 or 4-year-old have to deal with.
It happened to Brett when he took his Vegemite sandwich to the park in Chicago the other day, and people looked at him and said, "Woo, what is this? This is weird."
Well, my daughter took Vegemite to school when she was right. She would take a Vegemite sandwich to school, and it became this point of, my goodness. I mean, and I don't know, is that the right thing to do? I'm thinking, wow, I'm going to let my daughter take something that's ostensibly going to be really offensive to the rest of her little friends. It's really a very much an acquired taste. I guess I don't remember her ever expressing that there was any pushback, but there probably was. You know, they're probably like, "How can you eat this?" I mean, it's really terrible.
It doesn't necessarily have to be the food itself. I remember when our kids went to school, we packed lunches for our kids, and the way we in Germany pack the lunch we learned quickly was different than most American kids brought their lunches to school. And my daughters came home and said, well, they were laughing about, or they were asking questions. They weren't laughing. They were asking questions about this container that was in, and why do you get this type of food? So this is an experience that children who don't follow the quote unquote mainstream culture of where they grew up will be exposed to, right? So how are your books or other products that IndieGrow is developing, how are they addressing this? So tell us about what IndieGrow does differently.
So for us, firstly, the one thing is that culture can be very intimidating, right? Across the board, you know, whether you're a child or an adult, any kind of culture, and especially in today's day and age where, you know, we're also kind of careful about stepping on somebody's toes. We're worried about saying the wrong thing. We're about, you know, eating in the wrong way, wearing the wrong clothes and things like that. And any kind of culture, when you don't know enough about it, you worry that I'm going to say the wrong thing. And because human nature, we're so worried about making a faux pas, we step back and we completely say, you know, I'd rather not deal with that than make a mistake. And what we're trying to say is that, you know, it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to, let's have that conversation. And the best way for children to connect is through play. So we create games, we create stories. So the idea being that now, say, for example, if I were to take the Indian culture, for example, it can be intimidating to most people. It's intimidating to most Indians, right? I mean, if I'm not cultural in the traditional sense, you know, I'm worried that I might, you know, anger some auntie who considers herself to be extremely cultural, right? So the point being that how do we break it down? How do you make it relatable? How do you make it inclusive? So when you put it in the form of games, as a child, 3-year-old, I have a friend who comes over. We play the game. The cultural context is different. It's a memory game. So every child across the world knows how to play memory. It's just matching 2 cards. But when you see the autos, you see a Kathakali dancer, or you see, say, an Indian wedding on one of those cards, automatically the associations start to form. It's visual. But I don't need somebody to break it down. It's not a lecture. We're not talking about diversity. We're not saying that, oh, this is what you need to learn about India and this is how Indians are. It just is. It's part of your play. What we're saying is that you can't have diversity sitting on a shelf in a bookstore anymore. It needs to be part of your everyday life, and it needs to go beyond takeout on Sunday evenings, right? You can't, you know, I find that a lot of the people, they'll say, oh, you know, but we're so diverse. We ordered Korean food the other day and my children love Korean food. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, you know, yes, Korean barbecues and sushi and Indian curry. Yes, that's a good step in the right direction. But I think you need to go a bit more. It needs to be part of your everyday life. It needs, you know, bring in the puzzles, bring in the games, bring in the songs, bring in the books, and make, you know, today pizza and pasta are everyday words in any household across the world. Why? It started somewhere. Right? It's because it got culturally integrated. And I think that when we start to make culture part of play, everyday play, that's when the impact happens, and that's when it becomes part of their world. And that's what we do.
So I've got an important question here. As an Indian, you would relate to this. And there is hope that everybody will play cricket on the face of the planet if we embed it into early childhood. I believe it's possible, Akhila. Thank you.
Well, the US has a cricket team, so there's hope.
There is, yes. But, you know, I play cricket here, but it's people, you see when you're playing cricket here in the summertime, it's in neighborhoods and people are doing their jogging, and they're jogging looking, what are these crazy people doing out there in the middle of the field? This is not a game I know. So anyway, I digress, but yeah.
It has been Brett's mission to impart cricket somehow in as many episodes as possible. So well done, sir. So is this something, is Indigo solving a problem in, let's say, first of all, in India where you live? Because traditionally there haven't been early childhood education products to support this cause. I'm trying to draw a parallel here to North America when, I don't know, it was probably in the 1980s or 1990s, when the manufacturers of dolls, one particular brand that is very popular in North America, all of a sudden started producing dolls with different skin tones and different hair colors and even different body types. But that was a very slow process. So the white majority ethnicity / culture in the US was perpetuated, or its perceived supremacy, and I'm putting that in quotation marks, was being perpetuated by the play products that were available to families and children. And it took a long time to break up those stereotypes in the form of what's available for parents and children. Is that something where you see India is still a few steps behind, that there's so much still colonial remnants of what educational materials should be like, that you're beginning to break this up, or am I misreading this?
No, so I think there is stuff in India that is coming out nowadays that has Indian cultural context. There are a lot of publishers that are doing really good work in India in creating content that is specific to the Indian narrative. But I think that what we found that was lacking, especially for the Indian diaspora market, especially, was that there's a lot of focus on language. There was a lot of focus on religion. And even within India, there's a lot of the old folklore that tends to kind of come into play. But there was nothing that kind of made it contemporary, made it global for today's child. The other thing was this idea of connected play. You know, how a book and the puzzle and the memory game, we've kind of created this little universe where a child can deep dive into. And that's something that we've really focused on, because and especially at an early childhood level, children make connections all the time. They don't, a book does not stay at a book. You know, when you read your child a story at bedtime, the conversation gets repeated at the sandpit. The characters come out and, you know, they're involved in the Play-Doh when their child is working with the Play-Doh, and then they come out with Lego, because that's how the way the child's brain works. The more number of times that they get to apply it and they put it into different contexts, it's how they make sense of it. And that's what we're trying to create. We're trying to create multiple touch points, because it's not enough to have that one conversation. It's not enough to read that one book and put it back on the shelf. And that's the point here, the multiple touch points, because at every different point, so when you read the book, then you play the puzzle, and then there's some other thought that you kind of occurred, and you're like, hey, you know, that happened in the book, but in the puzzle, you know, suddenly you're thinking about, but why is the Kathakali dancer like this? And, you know, there's some other question that comes to mind. And for children, they need that. They need the opportunity and the space to process, to absorb, and, you know, the connections in the brain to be formed, to have that conversation and take it forward, so to speak.
So that they don't begin categorizing it at an early age and putting it in a drawer chest that is only appropriate to open that and take it out in a certain context. No, you're breaking down those silos or those barriers, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because right now, even if you see in a classroom, right, you'll have multicultural book day, and that's when all the diversity books will come out.
Right.
And then they put away for the rest of the year, you know, and that's what we're trying to change, that it shouldn't be one day in a year.
Right. It's funny. It's funny that you say this, because here in the United States, the month of February, which also happens to be the shortest month of the calendar year, is reserved for what they call here in the United States Black History Month. So today is the first day of Black History Month. So it's interesting. I never understood this concept, right? So I'm an immigrant to this country. So you're talking about African American history for 1 month, and the other 11 months you don't talk about it. So you also pick the shortest month to talk about it. Interesting. So it's a compartmentalization that I still haven't fully understood what the reasoning behind that was, or what the actual benefit of that potentially could be. But that's not what we're here to discuss. But I thought there was an interesting parallel between what you just said and what's going on here in this side of the world.
And I think that's because at an adult level, it's hard. You know, change doesn't happen immediately, right? It's a very slow, organic change. I mean, it's only now that we're talking about it, right? It's only now with Black Lives Matter and things like that, people are, you know, voicing themselves. They're using social media. They're using their platforms to kind of raise awareness, etc. And it's all happening at a very adult level. Now, what we're trying to say is that we don't need to wait till then. And the fact is that children do not form biases. We pass on our biases to our children. Our children are born with a clean slate. They don't need a multicultural book month. They don't need a specific month to learn about something. If this is what they know, then this is what they grow up with. Right? It doesn't matter what your ethnicity is. You could be, you know, an Indian immigrant growing up in Germany, but as far as the Indian child is concerned, I'm German, because that's all I know. So it's literally what they grow up with. And that's what we're trying to say, that, let's raise them in a way that they have access to everything, and they have access to all conversation, all kinds of people, all kinds of content, and that will shape them to be better, more empathetic human beings. Let's raise them to learn what it's like to be themselves, but also how to put themselves in other people's shoes.
I love your passion about this, Akhila, because I think it takes not only somebody who is a spokesperson for the company they helped start, but people don't buy your product, they buy your passion, right? And I'm suspecting that Shama, your partner, is no less passionate about it. So how have your how long has this been around, and what's been the success so far?
So we started in March of 2019. So we've been it's almost 2 years now. It's for us, we're a small company, we're growing pretty quickly, but it's taken off really, really well. We've been both humbled and amazed by the outpouring of love that we've received across the world. We've had, of course, from the Indian diaspora as well, because that's our largest audience at this point. But we've also had people like, there was an Italian lady who bought our books because, she just said that the message in them and the way in which they came across, it just, so we asked her, actually, why did you buy our books? And she's like, things made with love reach all the hearts of the world. And she said it in Italian. And for us, for me especially, I was just like, I was blown away by that, because that's exactly what we're trying to do. It's you're trying to create impact, and if we can, that one little child whose perspective we can change, that one family that we can help and create that impact, that's all we're looking for. So
well, you gave us a key. You gave us a prompt. You reminded me to ask our audience, because you said you have customers in Italy. So let's ask our audience, whether you're watching this live or the recording, let everybody know where in the world you are watching this from. And I want to give a shout out to one commenter here. I'm not quite sure yet where Dmitry is located, but he says Russia, so I'm suspecting he might be Russian. Not really sure where in the world Dmitry is located, but hey, I want to give a shout out to everyone watching and commenting. And he found Black History Month weird. I'm saying weird, but he found it hard to grasp. All right. Thanks, Dmitry. So New York. All right, a Russian in New York. And we have an Austrian in Canada. Esther, thanks for watching. Excellent. Thanks, everybody. Just type it in where in the world you're from or where you're watching from. Either way, you can type in both, where you're from and where you're watching from. That might be two different locations. Now, I heard you mention the Indian diaspora several times, Akhila. And many of our audience members might be aware of this, but I don't want to take that for granted. So when you say the Indian diaspora, how big is it, and what should we know about it?
So, well, a diaspora is nothing but Indians who are not living in India, right? So it's Indians who might have moved out for work. It might be second generation Indian origin people, second generation, third generation Indians. So it's if you consider that there are 1 billion Indians in the world, it's a pretty large size of population that's not living in India. It goes into the millions. So yeah, it's a pretty big chunk. I think that we're the largest diaspora in the world. So the Indians and the Chinese.
I should have researched the numbers. I wouldn't know. I couldn't tell you.
But that would also be obvious in terms of the population. So India and China, yeah.
Shouldn't be that hard to get that many people out if you have so many in your own borders. You also mentioned a couple of times contemporary and present day India. And that brings me to something that I only know very little about, that I read a lot about, and that came out through conversations I had with other facilitators in our field, but also with clients that either worked and lived in India or are from India, that the last, let's say, 10, 20 years have seen a significant generational shift almost. It's not like there's generational shifts happening with every generation, but that the sense of identity, what it means to be Indian in the 21st century for a broad base of well-educated younger people, let's say millennial generation, or now the Zs even, they may have a different self-image of what being Indian or being from India, what that means to them compared to the more, you said folklore earlier, the old-fashioned type of cultural markers of India. Is that something that I'm seeing through my Western lenses, or is this actually happening?
So I think that India, like any other old culture or old civilization, there's been a lot of change that has happened in the cities, right? Especially urban cities. And what happens is that, so our cultural context has also evolved as such, with liberalization, with, development, Netflix, HBO, all streaming in, there is a change in cultural context in India. And so I think what tends to happen is that when you haven't visited India for a while, especially if you're living abroad or if you're a foreigner, your image of what India is tends to be based on, say, a Slumdog Millionaire, right? And that's not necessarily an accurate representation. It may be one.
Is White Tiger better? Do we need to watch White Tiger instead?
Yeah.
Again, these are all one part of it. They're not
right.
all of it, right? And I think that's true of any culture. And I think that's the problem that you will face no matter which part of the world you're in. With any culture, there will always be a stereotypical notion of what that culture is and how it's depicted in the outside world. And I think that's where, for us, we're trying to kind of break it down, and we're saying, no, let's look at it from all aspects. So when we say we're contemporary, we're not only talking about the food, we're not only talking about the language, we're not only talking about the buildings and the architecture or the art. It's everything, right? We touch upon everything. Obviously, again, it's not exhaustive. I don't think it's possible to be comprehensive about any culture, but it's about creating as many multiple touch points as you can and ensuring that the diversity of each culture is represented.
Nice. So, Brett, I see a question coming up. Brett, say it.
No. I'm just going to call out, there's a comment from Vali here who says it's the danger of a single story, right? Everybody, there are multiple stories about this. So the story you hear from one person is not necessarily the story that exists for another. So it's
So where would people that live in the diaspora, or where would people that are interested in exposing their children to materials that are breaking down some of these single story narratives, where do they find your product?
So we're available on indigrokids.com. We ship
happen to have that here as an insert.
we ship globally to every part of the world. To date, except for Antarctica, we've shipped to every other continent. So, we're easily available.
Nice. And I would encourage everybody to check out their website just to get a feel for this and see how the presentation of the product may already break down some of the stereotypes you may have had. And this is what happened to me. This is actually why we're talking with Akhila here today, because we found each other on LinkedIn, and you introduced me to what you do, and I was like, okay, it's just a click away. Let's look at this. My internalized bias was expecting something quote unquote traditionally Indian, right? Yeah. And then I clicked on it, like, wait a second, this website looks like it was built by a 25-year-old Canadian web developer, and it's very responsive, and it is very current. Like, okay, this is not what I expected, and the whole product presentation, the way you talk about it, did not feed the stereotype. They were not strong, but there was a little remnant of it in my mind. Like, okay, great. So she's calling me out, even though we hadn't even talked with each other yet. And then when I talked to you, you kind of called me out again without using those very words. But I, again, was reminded that I expected a different communicative preference from you. The way you communicate with me or with us here is, some might say, well, very direct, very open. Some might even say a little bit more Western than I would have expected. And to me, there's an old TED Talk, if you can find it on YouTube or on TED.com. There's an old TED Talk by David Sivers. And it's less than 3 minutes long, or less than 4 minutes. So everybody in their lifetime has time to watch this. And there's one sentence that I will never forget. He said, whatever thing you might know about India, the opposite might also be true. And you remind me of that, because whatever I thought was right about India, or whatever I thought I really knew about India, there's an opposite that I hadn't encountered yet. So how do... No, this is something big that I'm putting on you, because I did a lot of cultural trainings last year that involved India. How do you resolve this kind of cognitive dissonance for people who are new to India, that there might be different competing narratives coming from Indian culture? How do you resolve that? I know that's a big question, but I'm giving it a shot anyway.
So I think that, as always, I mean, the way I would go about it is, and to me, I put my early childhood educator hat on, because at best, I think adults are just like big people, right? It's not that much different. But what
Especially
I would say,
for me.
what I would say is that, firstly, dealing with any culture, Indian or otherwise, right? The group does not speak, the individual does not speak for the group does not speak for the individual, right? So you have to treat each person as an individual. I think that's first and foremost. Second is, approach it with openness and curiosity. I don't think that anybody feels bad when you ask questions, when it's coming from a place of, kindness and curiosity. So it's okay to say, hey, I don't quite understand what's going on. Could you explain this to me? How does this work, etc. I think the minute you approach any interaction with openness and this willingness to learn about the other person and empathy, it automatically opens doors, and you're able to kind of take that conversation forward. And like I said, life is great everywhere across the world. You're not, nobody comes in a standard box. You'll always get a bit of both. You'll get what they want you to see. You'll get what, your own perceptions might be confirmed. Sometimes it'll be completely thrown out of whack, and they're both okay. So just open yourself up to the experience. I think that's the word for it. As long as you're open, everything else will fall into place.
See, it's not just us saying this, dear audience. There's others who confirm our hunch. Excellent. Thank you. We did not rehearse this. Thank you, Akhila.
Did I say exactly what you normally say?
No, you said in your words, which are much more powerful than we could say it. So thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was great.
All right. So we know where to get it, indierokids.com. This is where you go check it out. We encourage you to do so, whether you're Indian diaspora or not, doesn't matter. There's also the Singapore product line that you want to check out. And who knows, Italy might be next, going by the demand you outlined. I have a handful of customers I could send your way for Italy, probably.
That would be fabulous.
So, I just want to give you all a quick reminder. We talked about this last week, and we're doing this again this week. Brett and I are exploring and practicing on this new social media tool called Clubhouse. So join us for a chat on Wednesday, February 3rd. That's this week, Wednesday, at the times you see here, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, and very late in India. But if you're going to be up very late in India, you could still join us if you so choose. We're going to talk about the business of culture and the culture of business, what this program is about, but we're going to do it in a more open, conversive format. Just ask us anything and be surprised by the answers we might give you or not give you. So Clubhouse. Yes, it is still an Apple product only platform. I don't know when they're going to open it, so don't feel discriminated. It's not our exclusiveness, it's theirs. We're just using the tool as it is right now, and we're quite confident that it will blow up for other users as well in the near future. And find us on Wednesday. What else do we need to announce, Brett?
That's it. I think we've got a week ahead of more great guests and some tips, like we did last week, testing out this way that we're putting one particular topic and we're giving you actual resources to take away and read. So it's coming up as well this week. So yeah,
stay tuned.
Stay tuned. So yep,
Akhila, thank you very much for joining us. I know it's getting late and we don't want to take too much more of your time, and thank you for sharing your story. This was amazing. I love hearing from all corners of the world.
Yeah,
excellent.
Wonderful.
Two Chaps, Many Cultures, back again tomorrow. We're out for now. Ciao, ciao.
Bye-bye.